That's Reynaldo off to work. Of the whole extended family, the only two who really work hard are Aurelie, who runs the restaurant, and she is very smooth in the way she works. But she's the pillar of the family and the restaurant. She works full-time pretty much with staff that support her, and the whole family supports in some ways. But Reynaldo there has a serious job. He works with concrete all through this area, builds buildings. I wanted to find the Spanish to say to him that my first job out of college was pouring concrete. The new student residence hall being built at Loyola University on the north side of Chicago. They apparently, part of the contract was they had to hire a certain number of Loyola college students to work with them, and we were so completely inept. And the only time anybody worked hard on that job was one day a week. They would pour a new floor. It was a high-rise. It was like 20-some floors. The rest of the week we'd hang out and drink and make cat calls at the girls, back when you could still. And it was sweet and it was fun. And there were no railings or anything on the floors we would hang out on. But we'd hang out at the edge on the 13th or 15th floor. By the end of the day, after drinking all day, we'd be huddled in a circle in the middle of the floor, talking. But one day a week, they'd pour concrete, and you worked your ass off, pushing wheelbarrows full of concrete down these wooden ramps. And the black guys who were the serious workers there really knew how to do that. They were super at it. And all day long, you'd have a black guy with a wheelbarrow behind you going, "Tighten it up, college. Come on, let's go. Got to pour this floor. Let's go." It was a pretty extraordinary work experience for me. Great seminal memory. So concrete. All the buildings in Mexico are built with concrete. It's amazing. There's concrete everywhere. And there is hurricanes in this area. We're close enough to the Gulf of Mexico that they do get hurricanes. So it's great for that. This is a spot here where I've shot a lot of videos lately, because I used to just, in my 3 weeks now, tomorrow, of hanging out here at the restaurant Aurelie in the front, just little by little I've penetrated into the family, become enough part of the family that they don't mind me coming back here. And there's 3 nuclear families. One of them lives in the hotel. One of them lives in this building behind me. And Reynaldo and his family live back there. And he's got the 3-year-old, Yara, who I've gotten so tight with. So I want to talk about tethering. I've gotten pretty untethered from Chicago. I kept returning to Chicago as an adult. Very important town to me. I love Chicago, love Chicagoans, gritty, working class. Me as third generation Irish on the west side of Chicago before, I was 3 when we were part of the white flight from the west side of Chicago that turned the whole west side of Chicago over to black people. The Austin neighborhood butting right up against Oak Park, the first suburb. And I kept returning there and visited there in the fall of 21 and had a spectacular visit there, 6 weeks. Loved it so much that I briefly considered staying there for a year till it started to turn cold, and I remembered why you don't want to be in Chicago in the winter. So that was a big attachment that I've had to let go of. And I let go of my attachment to Chicago to move to Asheville in '04. Huge, to the south. I'd mostly never even worked in the south. Very, very little, even with my work at AT&T for 4 years. Very little in the south. So many southern states I had never touched in. And Asheville, not like the rest of the South. It's a little bubble of progressive and big city values, but a hippie, progressive mountain town right on the spine of the Blue Ridge Mountains. very desirable place. Hugely attractive place for seniors to retire, and part of the dialectic of Asheville is all the wealthy retirees who move there, and then the hippies and the artists and the musicians, the buskers. I think maybe the best busker town in all of America, even more than New Orleans. So I was 16 years in Asheville. And one of the two experiences of teaching, because I'm a long-time teacher, management consultant and college teacher, and diversity consultant for several years. And in Asheville, it's a pretty good place to be white. It's no longer a good place to be black, really. But the white people love to think that the black people are happy there because they're friendly and they greet you on the street. But I was part of the team. I got involved in building bridges. But my first week there, I saw a poster for building bridges, which was a 10-week course where they would work hard to recruit enough local black people to get the courage to come out and tell the truth about what life was like for them. And every week there would be a 1-hour presentation, maybe the history of the black community in Asheville. And every week you'd break out into a small group that would be facilitated by usually a black facilitator. Typically, I did diversity for a lot of years, and the dream team is a black woman and a white man, so that when the white guys fall back into their Buenos dias, señor.
Yeah.
Trabajo.
Sí.
Sí. Not much Spanish from me, but I struggled to get a little bit of it out. He's going to work. I don't know him. And somebody's getting up in this house. This is where Aurelie, the Danya, lives with her husband Miguel. But yeah, have a white man there so that when the white men would go into their denial, you would have bonded with them well enough that you could jump in their shit and say, hey, maybe you could try to listen. This person's trying to say something important to you. Buen dia.
Yeah.
Maybe he was just returning, I think he was just returning a letter that he had borrowed. The other big teaching I did in Asheville, where I had retired to not do professional work anymore because I was so broken from a wrongful diagnosis of bipolar disorder and the drugs they had me on. I was a broken man when I moved there in '04, desperately looking for a fresh start. The other bit of teaching was through the University of North Carolina, Asheville had a big college for seniors, non-degree program, enrichment programs for the affluent white retirees in Asheville. But Perry and Gray was on the staff there and was one of the people who processed me through to teach there. And after teaching a couple of other courses, she recruited me to teach a course on connection and separation. It was the course she had designed and had taught with somebody else who wasn't available, and she wanted me to do it with her. And what an amazing experience that was. Connection and separation, about as big a dialectic as you can come up with. And she would kick every session off by offering some poem or deep thought, and then we'd just do dialogue. It was a dialogue class where you didn't dump a lot of information, you talked. And out of 17 people in that course, 5 of them were therapists, and they were really good at talking. Not all therapists are, but they were really good at going deep, and we had amazing conversations about the dialectic, the back and forth between moving towards and moving away. Now, in my last 4 years, I've been really influenced by Brene Brown, who I call the wise woman for our time. And the dialectic she talks about that has influenced me tremendously is what she says from her social science research. The quality of human beings that most makes for happiness and emotional health is something she calls open-heartedness. And that was not a big deal for me. I had for years said it was all I really wanted to do was to open my heart. And it's a beautiful thing to do and something that nice people can embrace. But Brené Brown says that the quality of that most directly correlates with open-heartedness is something they have defined as solid boundaries. Solid boundaries. And it made sense to me because if you know you can protect your boundaries when you need to, then you're free to open your heart. And I've discovered that boots on the ground because since my waking up experience on June 26th of 19, I've gotten really good at solid boundaries to an extent that shocks people and alienates people who wanted me to stay nice, really preferred me that way. So, moving towards, moving away, I abbreviate open heart and solid boundaries to solid yeses and solid nos. You gotta have them both. You gotta be tough. You gotta be willing to be as tough as the situation requires, and I've moved into that with a vengeance. I'm really good at that these days. Now, when I had that big experience on June 26th of 2019, all my history of mental illness dropped away. I knew in an instant that it had always been a mistake. I went from super suicidal, 15 hospitalizations over 13 years, and was the night before extremely suicidal. All that dropped away. Life started coaching me about what to do, and it included move towards that job that you gave up because you were making too much money to live in this subsidized seniors place. You loved being a cashier at Earth Fair. Go back and get that job back. Put a boundary against this subsidized seniors building that is a grand building, but you hate it downtown. And so that dynamic between what to move towards and what to move away from, where to say no, has informed my whole 3 years on the road, because I did leave that building when the COVID hit and went to the mountains. Was invited out there by a friend who had a walk-in basement apartment up in the mountains, and I've been traveling ever since for 3 full years. But when I had that experience, which was a few months before I left Asheville, I was like shaking myself. What happened? Suddenly I'm happy, and honestly I've never been unhappy since. What is going on here? And a friend from my men's group, I had been in a men's group for 20 years. I've led and facilitated and formed and participated in men's groups almost as long as they've been around. And my men's group then was 4 guys who started in Chicago when we all lived there, but now was virtual. And I confided to them. I said, what happened to me? Did I get enlightened? I don't even like that word, enlightened. So what's this all about? Well, Lee from the group, big reader and a PhD himself and a management consultant, runs a consulting firm, had been reading the book by Michael Singer called The Untethered Soul. And I had encountered that book a little. My friend Tom was playing it in his car one day. It's been influential to a lot of people. I found it way too heady and intellectual and have never read it. But Lee said that Michael Singer's definition of enlightened is unreasonable happiness. Happiness for no reason. You just are. That's the state you inhabit. And that's been my situation for the last 4 years. And that's what happened to Eckhart Tolle. He went from suicide, the guy who wrote the book, The Power of Now, that influenced so many people, and me along the way, and my son. Just woke up happy. Byron Katie, another important teacher in my life, and does amazing work in the world. Same deal there. She was literally going to commit suicide the next day, went to sleep and woke up happy. Got untethered. They let go of their whole story, their whole thought about who they were, and woke up, and that happened to me. So Lee from the men's group was the one who helped me understand it, but he never understood it because I left that men's group because I didn't like the way they held their meetings. It was half an hour each with people just patiently listening, which is not the way I do conversations anymore. But I stayed in touch with Lee especially. Tom, I had to fire pretty ruthlessly when just about a year ago, less than a year ago, he confided to me that the reason he had not been answering my calls for a long time was that he could not accept my irresponsible cowboy lifestyle of traveling full time. So I did a pretty good takedown of him. There's a video I have in TikTok and YouTube called Fuck You, Jack. And in that video, which was my dispensing with him as a friend, I did say fuck you about 8 different times. So, but Lee stuck because he's been tremendously helpful to me. He doesn't give me much money anymore. It'd be like $25 instead of big infusions. But he would be there as somebody I could talk to. And I knew he did not know who I was in the same way that Tom absolutely had not updated his files. But I've kept him. And 2 other people. A woman from Jubilee, the church I attended in Jubilee, who's been a loyal friend for a long time. And my stepbrother, who is the one remnant of my family that I haven't fired yet. And he's a really good guy. Really good guy. But lately, life has been saying to me, get untethered more. You quit Facebook for a year. That was really good for you. You went back to it because your Mexican phone plan made it easy to post your videos there. You're getting off it again, which is great because that's your past. You need to disconnect. A lot of people you love there, but none of them has a clue as to who you are. And these 3 people, Lee and Dennis and Ruth, they don't have a clue of who you are. Lee's walked the whole walk with you, but he's so competitive he can't let himself see what's happened to you because it would shake up our relationship where he wants to be the helper. So I'm letting go of all them pretty radically. Haven't made contact with any of them for a month. Which means that at this point, there's nobody from my past. Nobody from my past. No Facebook, no Asheville. Each of my friends I have walked because what I've realized is that if you reach out to help for someone who has no clue who you are, it keeps you tethered, keeps you stuck. And here I am in Mexico, a dream for me. Move on. And now move on from this little podunk town of El Diamante to Mexico City, my next big stop, which nobody in this town can even comprehend the notion of going to Mexico City. Why would you go there? It's like the Big Apple in New York, in the U.S., which my favorite city in the U.S., along with New Orleans. That's where I'm going, because I have to unhook. It's been wonderful for me here. The Wi-Fi has allowed me to go back to posting to TikTok and YouTube, which has allowed me to get off of Facebook. But at this point, it's tying me down, and I have to move on. So, I think I've just said everything I have to say about that. Have a great day.